Ladies and gentlemen, this morning is not like every other morning. The sun may have risen the same, the birds may have sung their familiar songs, but something in the air is different. There is a divine stirring, a quiet whisper from heaven saying, "Your story is about to change." You may have walked through storms, cried in the dark, or felt forgotten by life itself. But today God has turned his eyes toward you. This is not the morning of defeat. This is the morning of divine reversal. Hold your heart steady, because when God moves, everything that once broke you will begin to bless you. Every storm carries the seed of a new beginning. When the winds of life blow against you, when thunder shakes your peace and rain falls heavy on your spirit, it is not always a sign that you are being punished or abandoned. Sometimes it is a sacred preparation, a breaking of the ground so that something greater can take root. Storms do not come to destroy you, they come to teach, to cleanse, to renew. The soil of your life must be turned over before new growth can happen. You cannot plant seeds in hardened ground, and sometimes pain is the only plow strong enough to break it open. So when the storm rises, it is not the end. It is the beginning of something that could not have been born in comfort. In every life, there are moments when we are forced to face darkness so thick we cannot see a single star. Those are the moments that test the soul, that strip away every illusion of control, that leave us bare before our Creator. But within that deep darkness lies the very seed of light. You see, it is only when we are emptied that God can fill us. It is only when everything we have built collapses that He can begin to build what will last forever. The seed of new beginnings is always hidden in endings that feel unbearable. The storm simply reveals it, uncovers it, nurtures it with the rain of our tears. When you stand in the middle of a storm, your first instinct may be to run for shelter, to escape the chaos, to hide until it passes. But the truth is, every storm carries a message meant only for you. You cannot outrun your lesson. You must stand still and listen to the wind. It speaks of growth. It speaks of faith. It speaks of resilience. The same storm that tries to uproot you is the one that deepens your roots. The more the wind blows, the stronger you become if you refuse to bow to fear. You learn to sway but not to break, to bend but not to fall, to stand tall in the face of all that comes against you. And oh, how beautiful it is when a soul that has weathered the storm begins to bloom again. The petals may carry the memory of the rain, but they shine brighter for it. The fragrance of such a life cannot be faked. It comes from having known both loss and restoration. Every scar tells a story of survival. Every tear water a seed that will one day blossom into wisdom. You cannot become who you were meant to be without passing through the winds of change. The seed must be buried before it can rise. The darkness of the soil is not a tomb, it is a womb. The storm is not your destruction, it is your transformation. When lightning flashes, it may frighten you, but it also illuminates the path ahead. When thunder roars, it may shake your confidence, but it reminds you that you are alive. When rain falls, it may soak your spirit, but it is also cleansing your heart of what no longer serves you. You are not being punished, you are being purified. The seed within you cannot grow until the old layers of fear, doubt, and disappointment are washed away. And so the storm does its holy work, not to harm you, but to heal you in ways you may not yet understand. Think of every person you have ever admired, every soul that radiates strength and grace. None of them reached that place without walking through their own storm. The most beautiful souls are those who have endured the hardest rains. They learned that pain is a teacher, not an enemy. They discovered that heartbreak can awaken purpose, that loss can awaken gratitude, that endings can awaken beginnings. What you are going through right now is not for nothing. The wind may howl, but it cannot destroy what God has planted in you. You are not a victim of the storm. You are the vessel of something being reborn. When you begin to see your struggles through the eyes of faith, everything changes. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start saying, "What is this teaching me?" You stop seeing obstacles as walls and start seeing them as doors waiting to be opened. You stop fearing the rain because you realize it's watering your destiny. Every tear you cry becomes nourishment for the seed of your new beginning. Every sleepless night becomes the dark soil where your faith grows deep roots. Every disappointment becomes the wind that carries away what was never meant to stay. Life is a cycle of seasons, and no storm lasts forever. The rain may fall long, but eventually the clouds part and light returns. The air feels fresher, the sky clearer, the world somehow more alive. That is what happens to the soul that endures. It comes out clearer, stronger, more peaceful. It learns to appreciate calm because it has known chaos. It learns to love light because it has walked through shadow. And when you come out of your storm, you carry something holy within you. The knowing that you can survive, the quiet power that no one can take away. There will be days when you look back and realize that what once broke you actually built you. That what once felt like loss was the beginning of alignment. That the storm that once terrified you was the very thing that pushed you into purpose. The seed could not grow where it was, so God sent the rain to move it, to shake it, to make it stretch toward the light. You see, the storm is not a curse. It is a calling. It is heaven's way of preparing you for what you prayed for. The things you ask God for often require you to change before you receive them. The storm is the classroom of that change. When you begin to understand this, you stop resisting the process. You learn to breathe in the middle of chaos. You learn to trust when you cannot trace the outcome. You learn that the same hands that allowed the wind to blow will also calm the sea. You learn that no matter how fierce the storm feels, there is purpose in its power. Every thunderclap is a reminder that something is shifting. Every flash of lightning is a sign that light is coming. Every gust of wind is carrying you closer to your new beginning. Even nature itself teaches this truth. After the storm, flowers bloom brighter, trees stand firmer, rivers run clearer. The world looks washed, renewed, born again. The same happens within you. The storm strips away what was false and leaves only what is real. It humbles you, softens you, deepens your compassion. It teaches you to value peace, to cherish simplicity, to honor your journey. You begin to see that your story is not defined by what you lost, but by how you rose. The storm gave you perspective, and that perspective gave you power. You may not see it now, but one day you will thank the storm. You will look back and see how it carried the very seed of your transformation. You will realize that without that season of breaking, you would never have grown into the person you were meant to be. The seed was always there, waiting to bloom, but it needed the rain. It needed the wind. It needed the shaking. You needed to be moved so that your roots could find new ground. The storm did not come to take you away. It came to plant you deeper. And so, when life shakes, when thunder rolls, when everything feels uncertain, remember, every storm carries the seed of a new beginning. Do not curse it. Do not fear it. Simply stand firm and know that even in the wildest wind, God is planting something within you that will one day rise strong and beautiful. What feels like chaos now is simply creation in disguise. The rain is not your ending, it is your becoming. God never forgets the soul that keeps believing, There are moments in life when silence feels heavier than sound, when prayers seem to disappear into the heavens without an echo, and when every step forward feels like walking through thick mud. You ask, does God see me? Does he hear me? Has he turned his face away? But even in those moments of loneliness, when faith feels fragile and hope feels distant, the truth is that God has never taken his eyes off you. Every tear, every whispered prayer, every act of quiet endurance is seen, is known, is remembered. Time may pass, people may forget, but God never forgets the soul that continues to believe even in the dark. Faith is not proven in sunshine, it is proven in shadow. Anyone can believe when life is easy, when blessings flow freely, and the path ahead is clear. But the real strength of a soul is revealed when nothing makes sense, when the answers do not come, and yet the heart keeps trusting anyway. That is the faith that moves heaven, the faith that touches God's heart. He does not measure the loudness of your praise, but the depth of your trust. When everything is stripped away, and you still say, I believe, that is when heaven leans close. There are seasons when you feel unseen, as though your prayers are lost in a vast silence. You may look around and watch others receive their breakthroughs while you are still waiting, wondering what you did wrong, questioning whether you've been overlooked. But what you don't see is that God is not delaying, he is developing. He is shaping the unseen, weaving the threads of your story in a way that only time can reveal. He hides you not to hurt you, but to prepare you. The waiting is not a punishment, it is a process. You are being seasoned for something greater than you can imagine. And if you were to receive it too soon, it might destroy you instead of bless you. God never forgets a soul that keeps believing, because faith is his favorite language. Faith is the bridge between your today and your tomorrow, between what is and what will be. Faith is the whisper that says, keep walking, when everything in you wants to sit down and give up. Every time you choose faith over fear, you add another line to your divine story. You show heaven that you trust even when you cannot see the outcome. And that trust does not go unnoticed. The angels record it, the universe aligns with it, and in the right season, the harvest of your faith begins to bloom. It is easy to lose faith when the world feels cruel, when people you love walk away, when doors close without explanation. But even those heartbreaks carry divine fingerprints. Sometimes God removes people and opportunities not to deprive you, but to protect you. Sometimes he allows endings so that new beginnings can unfold. When your heart breaks, it creates space for light to enter. The pain you feel today may be the very thing that opens you to a greater love, a higher calling, a deeper peace. God does not forget the soul that keeps believing, because that soul reflects his own nature. Unshakable, enduring, eternal. Every great life, every testimony of triumph began with a season of unseen faith. Think of Abraham waiting for a promise, Joseph forgotten in a prison, Hannah praying in tears, Job sitting in ashes. None of them could see what was ahead, yet they kept believing. And when the time came, their stories changed in ways that shook the world. God used their waiting to refine them, their pain to deepen them, their faith to elevate them. The same is true for you. What looks like delay is divine design. What feels like silence is sacred preparation. God is not ignoring you, he is aligning you. Faith has a sound that heaven cannot resist. It is the sound of someone still praying after being disappointed. It is the sound of someone still showing up after being overlooked. It is the sound of someone still loving, still serving, still trusting when everything in them wants to quit. That sound moves mountains. That sound reaches heaven faster than any shout of victory. It is the whisper of perseverance, the melody of trust, the quiet power of a soul that refuses to give up on God, even when life gives every reason to. There is something extraordinary about a person who keeps believing through heartbreak. The world may look at them and call them foolish, but heaven looks and calls them faithful, because belief in the absence of evidence is the purest form of worship. It says, God, even if I can't see you, I know you're here. Even if I don't understand, I know you have a plan. That kind of faith cannot be taught. It can only be lived. And every time you choose to live it, you are writing a testimony that will one day strengthen someone else's faith. You may not realize it now, but every moment of faith builds something eternal. Every prayer you've ever prayed still exists in the realm of spirit. It doesn't vanish, it accumulates. It gathers weight, gathers power, gathers momentum. When the time is right, all those prayers you thought were forgotten come rushing back like a flood, bringing blessings so abundant you'll wonder how you ever doubted. God was collecting every tear, every word, every sigh of your spirit. He was storing them in the vault of His divine timing, waiting for the day when everything would align perfectly. There is no expiration date on faith. Just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't. God's promises do not decay, they mature. They ripen in the soil of time, watered by patience, strengthened by endurance. When your faith stays alive through drought, through doubt, it becomes unstoppable. The soul that keeps believing becomes a beacon. Not because life has been easy, but because it has kept its light burning even in the storm. Sometimes God tests your faith, not to see if you believe in Him, but to show you what's inside you. He already knows your strength. He wants you to know it too. The waiting seasons reveal your resilience, your courage, your depth. They strip away the shallow and reveal the sacred. And when you come out of that waiting, you carry something more valuable than the thing you prayed for. You carry wisdom, humility, compassion, and an intimacy with God that only comes through struggle. God never forgets the soul that keeps believing, because that soul carries a fragrance that fills heaven. It is the scent of trust mixed with tears, of hope mixed with heartbreak, of surrender mixed with strength. It is the scent of someone who has walked through fire, but refused to let the flame consume their faith. That fragrance rises like incense before God, and He cannot resist responding to it. In His perfect timing, He will open the door no man can close, and when He does, you will understand why the waiting was so long. You may have thought your prayers were lost, but they were being stored. You may have thought your faith was ignored, but it was being refined. You may have thought your hope was wasted, but it was being multiplied. The delay was not denial, it was divine choreography. Every disappointment was redirecting you towards something greater, something higher, something that could not have come to you without this exact path. God's memory is flawless. He never forgets the promise He made to your heart, even if you have. There are times when you have to walk by faith, with no confirmation, no sign, no assurance, but your own quiet conviction that God is still working. It is in those times that your belief becomes unbreakable. When you can praise without proof, trust without evidence, love without condition, then your faith becomes a force that cannot be shaken. Heaven recognizes that kind of belief and responds with power beyond imagination. The world may call you forgotten, but God calls you chosen. The world may call you waiting, but God calls you becoming. Every second of your faith journey is recorded, remembered, and redeemed. Nothing you have endured has been in vain. Even the smallest act of faith, The single prayer whispered through tears, the simple choice to get up again after being knocked down, is seen, treasured, and multiplied by heaven. And though it may not come when you expect, it will come. The blessing, the breakthrough, the peace you've prayed for, it will arrive wrapped in divine timing, carrying the weight of every moment you kept believing when it would have been easier to give up. You will look back and see that God was there in every detail, guiding every step, catching every tear. You will see that He never forgot you, not even for a moment. Because God never forgets the soul that keeps believing. Change doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it begins with quiet faith. There are moments in life when everything around you looks the same, when days blend into nights, and nothing seems to move, and yet beneath the surface something sacred is shifting. You might not hear the sound of transformation, you might not see any sign of progress, but faith is working quietly, invisibly, patiently. It does not shout, it whispers. It does not demand attention, it grows in silence like roots beneath the earth. Before a tree ever rises into the sky, it spends time hidden underground, stretching downward, anchoring itself in unseen strength. That is how real change happens. Slowly, silently, in places no one can see. We live in a world that celebrates the dramatic, the instant, the obvious. We want breakthroughs that come with noise, success that arrives overnight, transformation that everyone can witness. But God often moves in the opposite way. He changes hearts before He changes circumstances. He plants peace in the middle of chaos. He molds character in moments of stillness. The greatest changes rarely announce themselves with trumpets. They come like dawn, softly, almost unnoticed, until suddenly you realize light has filled the sky. Quiet faith is that dawn. It is the gentle beginning of something powerful that will one day transform everything it touches. You see, quiet faith is not weak faith. It is not the absence of passion or fire. It is the maturity of trust. It is the calm knowing that you do not need to see everything to believe in what God is doing. It is standing still when the world rushes past, refusing to panic, choosing to believe that God is working even in silence. It is that deep breath before the miracle, that stillness before the breakthrough. It is not the absence of action. It is the presence of surrender. When you stop forcing outcomes and start trusting divine timing, you enter the space where real change begins. Change that comes from faith is different from change that comes from willpower. Willpower can push, but it cannot transform. It can build, but it cannot bless. Quiet faith, however, moves mountains in ways you can't explain. It is not loud like thunder, it is steady like gravity. It pulls you toward purpose even when you can't see the path. It shapes your words, your thoughts, your energy. It reminds you that every seed of hope planted in patience will one day find the strength to bloom. You may not hear it growing, but it grows. The small shifts you make in faith today are the beginnings of great transformations tomorrow. Choosing to forgive when you could stay angry. Choosing to hope when you could despair. Choosing to pray when you could complain. These are not loud acts, but they carry divine weight. Every quiet act of faith builds the foundation for something extraordinary. You are not waiting for change, you are becoming it. Every small decision you make in alignment with peace, love, and trust is shaping your future in ways that will one day become visible. Sometimes we think change must feel dramatic to be real, that God's movement must come with signs and wonders, that our lives must shift overnight for us to know He's working. But God often works like a potter with clay, gently pressing, shaping, smoothing. The process is slow, deliberate, intentional. It doesn't feel powerful while it's happening, But when the form is finished, you see the masterpiece that was hidden in the shaping. The gentle hand of God moves quietly, but its power is absolute. Every whisper of faith is like the artist's touch, molding you into what you were always meant to be. Quiet faith is the strength of those who refuse to give up even when nothing seems to change. It's the mother praying for her child year after year. It's the dreamer working in silence while no one watches. It's the soul who keeps loving, forgiving, believing when there's no applause, no validation, no guarantee. It's not the loud shout that shakes the heavens. It's the quiet persistence that draws God close. The universe bends toward a soul that keeps believing in silence. There is a rhythm to God's timing, and when you align with it, you realize that stillness is not stagnation, waiting is not wasting, silence is not absence. These are the moments when faith becomes deep, when roots are strengthened, when identity is clarified. In quiet seasons, God often removes noise so you can hear His voice more clearly. He hides your progress not to deny it, but to protect it. The caterpillar doesn't announce its transformation, it disappears into a cocoon, trusting the unseen process that will one day give it wings. Quiet faith is the cocoon, a sacred space of trust where transformation unfolds unseen. When change begins in silence, you may doubt it's happening at all. You may wonder if your prayers are reaching anywhere, if your efforts are being wasted. But just as seeds break open underground before they rise toward the light, your breakthrough begins beneath the surface. The soil of your patience is nourishing something divine. Every day you choose faith instead of fear, peace instead of panic, love instead of bitterness. The roots of your transformation grow deeper. One day you will wake up and realize you are no longer who you were. Your heart is softer, your mind clearer, your spirit stronger, and you won't be able to pinpoint when it happened. Quiet faith made it so. There's something sacred about growth that happens in silence. It humbles you. It teaches you to rely not on evidence, but on essence. It reminds you that life's most powerful shifts rarely need to be announced. They simply reveal themselves through the way you move, speak, and love. You stop needing to prove your transformation and start embodying it. You stop chasing change and start becoming change. Quiet faith transforms you from the inside out, so that by the time the world notices, you've already become someone new. Think of the morning light. It doesn't arrive all at once. It starts as a whisper at the edge of the horizon, softening shadows, coloring clouds, stretching slowly across the world. The night does not end in one instant. It fades gradually, making room for light. That's how divine change happens. It doesn't rush, it unfolds. It doesn't announce, it reveals. You may not feel it hour by hour, but one day, you'll notice that what once felt impossible is now your reality. Quiet faith carried you there. Quiet faith is the birthplace of miracles. Every miracle begins as a thought, a whisper, a moment of trust. Long before the manifestation, there is the unseen moment when a soul says, "I believe." That moment shifts everything in the spirit. It begins a ripple that grows silently until it becomes a wave. The world might not see the moment you choose faith, but heaven does. And that choice sets divine motion into play. That's why you must never underestimate the power of a single, silent moment of belief. It may not be loud, but it is eternal. Change that comes through quiet faith is often the most lasting, because it is built on surrender rather than struggle. What you fight for can exhaust you, but what you trust for sustains you. You stop forcing outcomes and start aligning with grace. You learn to flow instead of push. You stop grasping and start growing. In this space, peace becomes your rhythm and patience becomes your power. You begin to understand that when God works quietly, it is because He is doing something deep, something that cannot be rushed, something that will stand the test of time. Quiet faith teaches you to honor the process, to celebrate small progress, to find beauty in the in-between. It teaches you that stillness is not emptiness, but fullness waiting to unfold. It helps you realize that God often whispers before He thunders, that peace often precedes power. The heart that learns to rest in this truth becomes unshakable. It no longer needs proof to feel secure. It knows that the same God who began the work will finish it, even if the world can't see it yet. When you live with quiet faith, you begin to notice the subtle ways God moves. A conversation that encourages you just when you need it. A closed door that redirects you to something better. A delay that saves you from harm. A moment of stillness that gives you clarity. These are not coincidences, they are confirmations. They are God's quiet fingerprints on the canvas of your life. The louder your world becomes, the more important it is to listen for these whispers. The divine rarely shouts. It invites you to notice. Quiet faith is where transformation meets peace. It's the gentle acceptance that everything unfolds as it should, in divine timing, in divine order. It is not passive, it is powerful in its restraint. It teaches you to let go of control without losing direction, to trust without needing to understand, to move without rushing. This is the kind of faith that changes not only your life but your spirit. It gives you a calm that cannot be disturbed, a confidence that cannot be shaken. And when the day finally comes that your change becomes visible, when your prayers begin to bloom, you will realize that it was not one grand moment that brought you there, but 1,000 quiet choices to keep believing, to keep trusting, to keep walking. You will understand that the silence was sacred, that the waiting was holy, that every unseen step mattered. Change didn't come loud. It began softly, in the stillness of your heart, in the quiet power of your faith. When God writes your story, even your pain becomes power. Every chapter of your life, no matter how broken or confusing it may seem, carries divine meaning when placed in the hands of the author who knows the ending before the beginning. Sometimes we look at the pieces of our past and see only fragments, the heartbreaks, the losses, the mistakes, and we wonder how any of it could possibly lead to something beautiful. But God does not write in straight lines. He weaves. He takes the torn edges, the missed turns, the tears that fell in secret, and He threads them into a story that holds more depth, more strength, and more purpose than we could have written for ourselves. What once wounded you becomes the very thing that shapes your wisdom. What once broke you becomes the foundation upon which your courage stands. Pain has a way of feeling endless when you are inside it. It clouds your vision, dulls your spirit, makes you question if there will ever be light again. But when God is the one holding the pen, even pain has a purpose. He does not waste suffering. He does not overlook tears. He does not allow wounds without weaving healing through them. Sometimes the very thing you begged Him to take away becomes the lesson that prepares you for the promise. You wanted relief, but He wanted revelation. You wanted escape, but He wanted evolution. God knows how to take what was meant to destroy you and turn it into the tool that develops you. There are moments when the story feels unfair, when your prayers go unanswered, when your dreams collapse, and your heart can no longer carry the weight of disappointment. In those moments, it's easy to forget that the author is still writing. The page you are on may be filled with sorrow, but it is not the final page. God never ends a story in pain. If you are still breathing, He is still writing. Every setback is a comma, not a period. Every delay is a pause for reflection, not the end of the narrative. He is editing your life with precision and patience, ensuring that every line of your story aligns with the masterpiece He has planned for you. When God writes, He writes with eternal ink. Nothing is wasted. Every failure becomes a lesson. Every rejection becomes redirection. Every heartbreak becomes holy ground. There is no part of your story that He cannot redeem. You may not understand the reason now, but one day you will look back and see that what you thought was pain was actually preparation. The valley you walked through was shaping the strength you would need for the mountain. The tears you cried were watering the seeds of your destiny. The silence you endured was teaching you how to listen for His voice. The beauty of God's authorship is that He writes from the inside out. While the world looks at circumstances, He looks at the heart. While others see endings, He sees beginnings. He uses pain as punctuation, marking moments that shift the direction of your story. Sometimes He allows a season of loss to make space for abundance. Sometimes He allows you to walk alone so you can learn how to hear Him more clearly. Sometimes He allows you to break so that the light within you can finally shine through the cracks. You may not see it now, but every chapter is necessary. Every page is sacred. Pain is not the enemy. It is often the instrument of awakening. When you hurt deeply, you begin to see life differently. You begin to value peace over noise, purpose over popularity, truth over illusion. Pain strips away what is shallow and reveals what is real. It humbles you, purifies you, deepens your compassion. It teaches you empathy for others, patience with yourself, and gratitude for the smallest blessings. The parts of your story that hurt the most will one day be the parts that heal others. That is how God works. He turns wounds into wisdom, scars into symbols of survival. When God writes your story, He does not erase your pain, He transforms it. He does not pretend it didn't happen, He gives it meaning. The cross was pain, but it was also redemption. The pit was dark, but it led Joseph to the palace. The wilderness was lonely, but it prepared Moses to lead. The belly of the whale was terrifying, but it brought Jonah to obedience. Every story that God writes contains both suffering and salvation, both breaking and blessing. You cannot have resurrection without crucifixion. You cannot have glory without struggle. You cannot have strength without the story that forged it. You may think your life has gone off track, but to God, there is no such thing. Every detour is a design. Every closed door is part of the direction. Every heartbreak is an edit. He is writing with divine intelligence, and His timing is perfect. The parts you want to skip are the very parts that make the ending powerful. Without the struggle, the triumph would have no depth. Without the pain, the peace would have no meaning. Without the waiting, the blessing would have no weight. There are times when God's handwriting is invisible, when the page looks blank, when nothing seems to be moving. But the absence of visible ink does not mean the story has stopped. Sometimes He writes in silence, shaping your heart, rearranging your path, preparing the next chapter before you ever turn the page. You might not see His hand, but it is there, guiding, molding, protecting. The delay you despise might be the grace that saves you. The unanswered prayer might be the redirection that keeps you aligned with your purpose. When you surrender your story to God, you release the need to control how it unfolds. You begin to trust that every twist and turn serves a greater plan. The pain that once felt unbearable begins to make sense in the light of grace. You start to see how every loss made you stronger, how every rejection refined your character, how every failure drew you closer to Him. The very things you once wished away become the moments you thank God for, because they made you who you are. Sometimes God allows pain to rewrite your priorities. The heartbreak that broke you open also taught you how to love yourself. The disappointment that humbled you also freed you from arrogance. The loss that shattered your plans also opened your heart to something higher. The loneliness that felt endless also introduced you to His presence in a deeper way. What you thought was punishment was preparation. What you thought was chaos was choreography. He was writing a story of strength through the ink of your struggle. When God writes your story, He uses everything: the joy, the sorrow, the waiting, the wandering. Nothing is wasted. Even the pages you'd rather tear out are essential. The story of your redemption cannot exist without the story of your fall. The story of your wisdom cannot exist without the story of your pain. God is not ashamed of your past. He redeems it. He takes what was broken and writes beauty from it. He takes what was lost and makes it meaningful. He takes what was meant for harm and transforms it into healing. You may not understand the story while you are living it, but one day the pieces will align. You will look back and see that every moment was leading somewhere sacred. The people who left made room for those who were meant to stay. The dreams that failed made way for those that were divinely aligned. The times you thought you were forgotten were the times you were being hidden for a greater unveiling. God was not ignoring you. He was editing your story to perfection. Your scars are not symbols of shame. They are symbols of strength. They are proof that you have endured and survived. They are ink marks on the pages of your life, showing where the author's hand has touched you. Each one tells a story of redemption, of rising again, of faith that would not die. The pain that once silenced you now gives you a voice that carries power. The hurt that once weakened you now fuels your purpose. The wounds that once made you question your worth now become the source of your wisdom. When you understand that God is the writer of your story, you stop trying to edit out the pain. You begin to see that even your lowest moments carry divine lessons. You stop rushing to the next chapter and start learning from the one you're in. You realize that the story is not about perfection. It's about transformation. It's about how love grows through loss, how faith deepens through doubt, how courage is born through fear. Every line of your life carries meaning because it was written by hands that know no mistake. There is something sacred about surrendering to the author's pen. It means saying, I trust you with my story, even the parts I don't understand. It means allowing Him to turn your suffering into strength, your confusion into clarity, your pain into purpose. It means believing that what feels like an ending is simply a transition to a greater chapter. The same God who brought you through yesterday is already in tomorrow, preparing your next scene with grace and intention. You are not forgotten, not forsaken, not finished. The author is still writing. And as he writes, he uses everything, every tear, every trial, every triumph. Nothing is wasted. The story may have pain, but it also has power. The storm may have shaken you, but it also strengthened your roots. The struggle may have stretched you, but it also awakened your soul. Every scar you carry is a word in His language of redemption. Every breath you take is proof that the story continues. Every heartbeat is another line written in divine ink. When God writes your story, even your pain becomes power.